Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for another series from the Smith.ai Masters webinar program. Today, we're talking about eliminating daily tasks for next stage law firm growth. Frankly, any type of business growth, but we're going to focus on law firms. I'm Maddy Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist service for small and medium-sized businesses. We do serve a lot of law firms, but many other types of businesses too. And I am joined by Charley Mann of Great Legal Marketing, and he's going to talk a little bit about himself in a moment. But before I introduce him, let's just talk about what we're going to cover today, because I'm really excited about this topic of getting unstuck, or when you feel like you're hitting a ceiling for revenue or profit growth. What is going to move your business to the next stage? So Charley's going to touch on a critical decision to make in order to hit your next stage of growth, how to overcome the mental obstacles that might be holding you back, 3 tactics to reduce time spent on email, answering questions your staff should be able to answer themselves, and more, the role processes play in your practice or business, and why they may secretly prevent progress. That one has me particularly interested. What are the highest level mastermind groups bringing to the table, bringing to light that Charley has found help people stay away from the time money trap? So what are best practices from those mastermind groups that he's and his team are running? And then how one preeminent researcher on behavior suggests you rewire your brain, interesting, to increase your productivity and reward yourself for working on your practice. That sounds Pavlovian to me, Charley. So
it is a little
tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into it. We've got a lot to cover today.
Absolutely. So I'm really glad all of you are here. I'm Charley Mann, the president and lead coach at Great Legal Marketing. And with the Hero and Icon programs, we serve small law firm owners, like many of you on here, who are doing 6 figures, 7 figures, and in some cases, a few 8-figure firms in not just growing their practices, but using the growth of a practice to facilitate a life of health, wealth, and happiness. So that's what we do. That's who we do it for. And boy, oh boy, do we love what we do. So Maddy, is there a particular one of those topics that you want us to kick off on?
Well, I mean, you might whet our appetite with a little bit of the psychological research, or maybe an anecdote from your mastermind groups, but willing to go with whatever pathway makes sense to you.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put a framework around this discussion that'll be really, really valuable. And for those of you who are here, understand that what I'm going to share with you has mostly been talked about in our upper level mastermind groups, been talked about with private clients, but we're going to bring it out into the public for you all, so that way you can see this and start using this tool in your practice. Anytime that we get a chance to work with Maddy, work with Smith.ai, our promise is always, hey, we're going to bring the really cool stuff out for you. So the tool that we have here, it's going to be really simple. Like all really good tools, like a hammer, you just swing it, and that's about it. Really easy to apply. The tool is the idea of a process versus an outcome. And I'm really sorry if you expected a fancy slide deck. It's not what I do. I can craft a fancy slide deck, but I love a whiteboard so much. So the idea of process and outcome is deciding how you as a firm owner or even a marketing director are going to focus on tackling a problem. And for many of you firm owners, what you're going to find is what I'm going to ask you to do is move from process to outcome orientation. If this sounds like Scientology level nonsense to you right now, I promise it will make practical sense soon enough. In our day-to-day lives, a lot of us get caught up in our processes. So let me use a very basic example of answering the phones at your law firm. The idea of answering the phones and doing intake is a process. The idea of answering within the 3rd ring and doing a specific scripted intake is a better process. But you, the firm owner, if all you're thinking about are just the processes, you will lose sight of the outcome. And what might the outcome be? I want to get 12 personal injury clients this month and have Nordstrom level customer service. Do people still understand the Nordstrom level customer service reference? I'm really hoping so.
I think so.
Or they want to provide a Disney level experience, right? We can all relate to that Disney level experience. And that is your outcome. Another example of an outcome in your law firm is you want to do $1 million per year in revenue. I want to do $1 million per year in revenue in a personal injury practice. Now, what we tend to get caught up in is the process of the legal work. And the process often plays into our ego. What happens is we start thinking to ourselves, well, I'm going to be a really good lawyer. I'm going to do such a good job of working up this file. I'm going to do such a good job of negotiating. I'm going to know how to get the crash site reconstruction experts. I'm going to know how to find all the things. I'm going to take the most magical deposition you've ever seen in your life. But as a law firm owner, when you get obsessed with every single one of those processes, your outcome will almost never come true. So why does that happen? Why do we end up losing out on that outcome? It's fundamentally because we start thinking that we have to do the processes. So that's the first thing that I want to instill. If we're talking about the critical decision to make to hit your next stage of growth, it is the decision to let go of processes and put your focus on outcome. Let's say, so with estate planning attorneys, Maddy, I work with a ton of estate planning attorneys. And a lot of them talk about like, oh, I've got to do signing meetings. I've got to do signing meetings. I've got to do I got to be in there because I got to wow the client, give them their favorite thing, Maddy, is I have to give them a really great last impression. Say, why? Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to be involved there? Well, because that's what attorneys do. I hate that language, just right up front. And by the way, I deal with this stuff in my brain as well. I'm going to come at this whole section from an idealistic point of view. Understand, I have my own head junk that I deal with too. I am not immune to it.
Totally. Amen.
Yeah. And the idea then is, what is the real outcome that we want? Well, usually the outcome is we want clients to have a great experience. And we ultimately have to have clients who do their signing documents. Well, let's go back into the process space. You can have a paralegal do that. You can have a legal assistant do that. I actually was just talking earlier today, I was talking with an estate planning attorney up in Michigan about this very issue and how to get him out of the signing meetings. And to get him out, that's his outcome, by the way. He doesn't want to do signing meetings anymore. Defined outcome, no more signing meetings. But he doesn't care how the signing meetings then get done. He doesn't then say it has to be an attorney who does the signing meetings. It just needs to be a great experience for the client. Okay, let's go shopping for a legal assistant. Okay, let's go shopping for a paralegal. And hey, if in the process, we find an attorney who is great at doing that, who loves doing signing meetings, that serves our outcome as well. We become process agnostic in order to achieve our outcome.
I mean, so that makes a ton of sense. And it also scales really well, because how many 6, 7, 8 figure law firms are you seeing where like that requirement is still in place? And what are the characteristics of the firm you want to be rather than the firm that you're in now? Because that firm that you want to be, the more that you set yourself up now for that business model, staffing model, whatever it is, the sooner that you can get there with fewer roadblocks.
Exactly. And Maddy, actually one of the last times that we did one of these sessions together, right, we talked about revenue per employee as a model for building the practice. And that kind of goes to the idea of outcome as well. If you want to run $1 million practice, if that's your outcome that you've got in mind, I'm going to run $1 million practice. It's going to be about 7 people. Now, you may want me to tell you as your coach exactly the 7 people that you need to stack up. You may want me to define that process for you. So that way you can kind of say, I followed the process. It was 2 paralegals. It was a receptionist. It was an intake specialist. It was an associate attorney and an admin plus me. So that's 7 people in total. I say, well, we have to remain process agnostic. Sometimes we're going to find out what the market will send to us. So if I want to do my $1 million and I know that that is going to be 7 employees, which for those of you who are wondering how we got there, find the last session that I did with Maddy, and you can see the math on revenue per employee. It was either the session or the session before. I can't remember which one we tackled that problem. So that would be the math that we're working with here. Process-wise, I can now figure out how it needs to be chopped up for my practice. And I can go to the market and basically say, well, let's see here. The market right now seems to have really great paralegals available to me. Because here's the thing. I can tell you, you should staff up on paralegals, which, by the way, I'm a general believer in. Let me be upfront about that. You should staff up on paralegals. They're great. But in your area, I don't know how many paralegals are actually available to you. What if you have a complete drought of paralegals where you are? The only thing that you have are legal assistants and associate attorneys. Well, if we're so locked in our process of I have to hire a paralegal, then our whole practice is paralyzed. You can't move forward. But if I know that simply my outcome is to get here, I can go process agnostic and I can adapt. I can say, okay, well, what does the market have? The market has associate attorneys. I will find an associate attorney. And I will start using that associate attorney, not just in signings, but also new client generation. And maybe they can actually oversee the paralegals that I hope to eventually hire. I start thinking way out past the locked in on my processes. You as a firm owner are entirely responsible for this. And as soon as you let someone else decide on this for you, on the outcome, you're going to be all over the place. Because there are plenty of people out there. I've seen it firsthand. There are plenty of people out there who will stand in front of you and say, this is what you want. The more challenging thing to do, and this is what I do, so take it for what it is, stand in front of people and say, you have to decide what you want. That's not my decision. I can show you models to get there. I know how to get there. I've seen it happen, but you have to decide what you want. This is really important. And this is one of those things, honestly, that I know that when people hear this, they sometimes will cast it to the side, right? They're looking for a perfect tactical solution to their problems and everything. And I'm not saying that to them right now, but that's because until we know your outcome that you want, we can't solve the rest of the stuff. So that's kind of a big, long tirade. And Maddy, if you can guide us into the next stage, that would be phenomenal.
I will. I just want to say one thing that sort of brings it down, to a more grassroots level, a little more simply. If that feels really like a big pill to swallow, this is a huge, hairy goal that I wasn't planning to quite tackle today. One of the examples that I would give here in terms of outcome versus process is you could use that example that Charley gave first. Do you answer the call within 3 rings, and are you qualifying leads and filling in an intake form with the proper sort of method? What is often lost is how much you need to call back leads to get them to close, and how much you need to nurture, et cetera. And that really gets at the outcome. If you have been told, make a call back, or if they don't leave a voicemail, they're not a serious lead, or, if they are leaving voicemails at all, a lot of it has to do with like, how much are you pursuing and putting your energy towards those outcomes and giving yourself the best possible shot at achieving them. If you're never calling anyone back because your process only extends to that first call, and you haven't identified what follow-up means at your firm, and you haven't even pushed the limit of where they're diminishing returns, then, I would say, are you sure that you're maximizing your potential to achieve those outcomes? If you're not making, for example, 6 attempts to reach that person, you're probably not optimizing your ability to connect and close with every new lead. So that's just one example.
And actually, I would love to dig even deeper on that, because the follow-up process is just so vital. So, and then we'll talk, more about the eliminating daily tasks and how you can discharge the $10 per hour work, so that way you can work on $1,000 per hour work, right? If one of our outcomes is to, let's say, sign 20 new clients in a month. I know some PI firms that need to sign 1 or 2 clients in a month. And I know some criminal defense firms that need to sign 100 plus clients in a month. I'm just using 20 as an easy number to guide everyone at home, right? So we want 20 new clients in the month. Let's say we have 100 calls in the month, right? There's 100 people calling us, of which only 30 are actually potential leads. So then we know that we need to close about 70% of those leads in order to do it. Maddy is exactly right. Once we know that outcome of, okay, I need to close 70% of my leads, now our job is to create processes or to find processes like what Maddy just talked about, following up at least 6 times. We can now use that process to achieve the outcome. One of the fundamental mistakes that is often made is we hear some of the advice about something like following up, and we say to ourselves, okay, I've been told I'm supposed to follow up, let's say 4 times. And all we do is we just place 4 phone calls, right? Because we've been told to do that. But when that process is not tied to that measurable outcome, we tend to give up because we don't really understand why we're doing this. Like even as a law firm owner, it can be difficult sometimes. It's why I see people, law firm owners in particular, kind of hop from process to process, right? Someone stands in front of them and says, you should do Facebook ads. Why? Are your clients on Facebook? Do they already have a history of converting on other Facebook ads? They stand in front of you and say, you should do YouTube videos. Why? Those are processes. Each one of those is a process, not an outcome.
So
now,
Charley,
yeah.
I want to interrupt you here just before you get too far ahead, because there's a couple of things that I really want to emphasize, because you're saying why and you're saying it once, and I would probably at every level say why. So let's just step back for a moment, and you're going to close 70% of the 30 leads. You got about 21 leads. Cool. So then the question is, why 21? Oh, well, because that's the, number that I set for myself back in January. It represents like month over month growth of this rate. Okay, you're getting, 20% month over month growth or 10% month over month growth. Great. Why? Right? Keep asking why. Why does that matter? So I can keep the lights on, so I can buy a vacation house, so I can retire early, so I can open my new office in the town, a few towns over that's got all this opportunity for me, and they're begging me to establish my firm there too. I mean, you have to keep asking why, because the problem is adherence to goals is only so much that you care about it. So if you just have 70% of leads should close. Why? Because my peers are doing it. I feel peer pressure. My coach tells me I should. Whatever the reason is, like, it has to actually resonate with you, or you will discount it. You will discount it all the way down to losing your focus on it because you don't actually feel connected to why that goal matters. And if instead you say, I need, in order to open that next office, or in order to hire a partner or bring on a partner or hire an associate attorney that takes on some of the work so I can spend more time at home, I need to close, this number of leads at this growth rate quarter over quarter. And then I'm going to have photos around my office of my family to remind myself of the core why and not the intermediary why.
So that it loops really nice and neatly, Maddy, into how I want you to measure any outcome that you set. So we have a process versus outcome template that we've distributed in particular to our accelerated groups. Some of my private clients have it in hand, and even some of our general members have seen this template. And when you input your outcome, you are supposed to input both a quantitative and a qualitative measure for it. This is really, really vital for you. So when we're talking about the subject of eliminating daily tasks, and let's say the outcome that we're looking for is you're not going to answer the phones anymore. Like you're a law firm owner with a paralegal. Let's say it's just those 2 people. You're saying, we are not going to be front lines on the phone anymore. That is a sort of in between quantitative and qualitative, but predominantly a qualitative measure. I'm not going to have to deal with the phones anymore. That won't be, my life won't be affected by the phone ringing. The quantitative measure there is then still the number of calls that you are receiving, or even better, it's a customer satisfaction number. That can be our quantitative measure right here, or it's the amount of time that you're spending doing $100 per hour tasks instead of a $10 per hour task. That can be our quantitative measure. But you have to anchor this right here, or another, actually, so I had a private client. So this private client, kind of a similar situation, technically a legal assistant, not a paralegal, also had a part-time bookkeeper / admin, but that's neither here nor there, right? I'm just filling in details here. Personal injury firm over in the Midwest, and we were trying to get him off the phones. His qualitative measure was he's not going to answer the phones anymore. So the quantitative measure for that, and he qualitatively, it was so that way he could focus on legal work, right? That's really what we want here. He wanted to be able to focus on legal work, meet in person with more clients, not be stressed out by the phone ring. Quantitatively, what was the measure for that? It was 0 calls answered by him every single month. 0 calls answered. That was our quantitative measure of success. If he hit that, it would improve the quality. If he focused on the quality, he would stop answering the phone. So he got rid of that daily task. Do you know how many attorneys are filling the coffee pot at their office every single day? How many of them are putting paper in the copier? I'm not saying that these things are necessarily beneath anyone, but they add up. So if what you are trying to do for your outcome is get rid of daily tasks, think about qualitatively what your life looks like when you're not doing that. What about placing these follow-up phone calls, right? That can be really, really time consuming. Or check-in phone calls with existing clients, also really, really time consuming. Can we get that off of your desk so that way you can focus on things that uniquely a law firm owner can do? And that is that critical decision, is what are the things that I, as the owner, can uniquely do to grow my law firm? What can I, as the owner, uniquely do to grow my law firm? Here's one thing that is not unique: how you work up a case, a file, etc. I know that we all take pride in us being really good at delivering our service. I take tremendous pride, Maddy, in my ability to deliver a service as a coach, for example. However, it would be foolish for me to think that I'm the only person who can do that. Because actually, Maddy, my better skill is developing frameworks that my future coaches can use to coach more attorneys and magnify the impact of what Ben and I do 10 times. And that is that thing that uniquely I can do that others may not be able to do. In your law firm, what can you uniquely do as the owner? You can uniquely, first off, set the goals and objectives of the practice, right? At the end of the day, you've got to answer to how much money is in the bank account. You can uniquely set those goals. When was the last time you sat down and set a big new goal for yourself and thought seriously about the growth of your firm? Maddy used that 20% number before. Have you thought seriously about, okay, to do 20% growth, let's say every quarter I want to make sure that I'm on trend for 20% growth. What does that look like? What needs to go into it? Who am I going to hire? Those are things unique to you as a law firm owner, that as the strategist, you need to be involved with that. You don't have to work on all the cases. You don't have to draft an estate plan. You don't have to get on every call with the insurance adjuster. If it's a Social Security disability practice, you can have a paralegal show up in court for you as an appointed representative. Right? There's all these things that you can get out of to do the work unique to you.
Well, and I think the other thing to consider here is, what work do you love to do? And if you haven't indulged yourself in that sort of thought exploration, then do so, because it can be very hard, again, when you start peeling back the layers of those whys, to actually have something that you feel personally connected to, that wasn't projected onto you, that you will have with you day in and day out, that guides your methods, that guides your expansion plans, that guides sort of your strategic movements, right? I mean, if you are looking at what everyone else is doing and you think, I need to do less admin work, I need to do less marketing copy, but if you actually are fantastic and you want to be head of business development and marketing and brand, and that is your ideal role as the or a firm owner in this practice that's growing, great, own that. And that's where more of your time should be. If it's really on, leading a trial, if it's really on being that face in the courtroom, so to speak, then lean into that. But that really has to come from within. As you were saying, Charlie, there's no prescription here. That sort of motivation has to come from you.
And man, people would love there to be a prescription there. And there is, by the way, there is out there what I loosely refer to as the cult of entrepreneurship. I would love to tell you, like I said earlier, exactly which way you're supposed to go. They're going to tell you exactly how much you should X your practice and your life and all this type of stuff, tell you the life you're supposed to want to live. I guess call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure that's up to me. That's up to Maddy gets to decide what Maddy's life is supposed to look like. But there has been a huge failure to me. And oh boy, we just entered rant territory, but I promise to keep it brief, that this is something that is taught down from the earliest levels of the education system. And there's a great book called Excellent Sheep that is about how we are sort of programmed through much of life to be cogs in someone else's machine, to work a certain schedule according to other people and to achieve the goals of others, to try and get an A for approval from the teacher. So that way we can go to college. So that way, all those rhythms, you have to escape that. You've been doing that so much in your life. You're a law firm owner. You're an owner. You own a business. That's the most amazing thing. Can I tell everyone here from my perspective? So for those of you who don't know my backstory at all, which is most of you, I started working for Ben Glass at Ben Glass Law and for Great Legal Marketing over 11 years ago in this weird little marketing job. I was a theater major in college, but Ben hired me because of experience I had writing for the website Bleacher Report. This is before Bleacher Report was really big. This is back when I was the featured columnist for the Denver Broncos in the Tim Tebow era. And I just look at the fact that Ben had a job for me that now has me here. I look at all of these law firms out there and I know the impact that you all provide. You look at it as the one job that you are providing to someone. I see from a macro level the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs that are provided by solo and small law firm owners out there. And round of applause to you all for providing those jobs. You are making an impact in so many lives by choosing to carry that burden of, I'm going to build something here. But to build it bigger and for you to provide more opportunities for more of those people, you have to learn how to let go of $10 per hour tasks. You have to, and this, by the way, is the thing that our accelerated members do really well, is they go through and they diagnose for themselves the $10 per hour, $100 per hour, and $1,000 per hour work that they do. For example, $1,000 per hour work could be cultivating referral relationships, right? Because that stuff can pay off huge in the future. Whereas $100 per hour work could be being the talent on a video, right? Because you're probably a pretty good representative of your law firm right there. $10 per hour work, and I'll stick with the video example, is editing your own video. It is, on the legal side, it is a medical records request in a PI firm. It is drafting documents in an estate planning firm. Now, in your estate planning firm, $100 per hour work might be the client meeting, right? Getting a client to sign up. That, in some firms, if you're doing really, really big clients, that may be $1,000 per hour work that you're doing, but in most firms, it kind of settles somewhere in the middle. Now, what we need to do once we start diagnosing all of this is we need to decide who can take this over. And we start from the $10 per hour space. We think very critically, how do I get this work off of my plate? If right now one of your $10 per hour tasks is doing something like answering the phone, right? Maddy Smith.ai, they can take that off of your plate so that way you can do more of the work that really makes you money. That's why we look to vendors like Smith.ai, partners like Smith.ai. It's why we look to a web development company to create your website rather than you manually coding it yourself. Why we hire people to do our SEO, to do our Google ads. It's why you hire a bookkeeper for your practice. It's why you bring people in general. My point of encouragement here for everyone, what I really want you to think about doing here is, for this work, get creative. And what I mean by get creative is take yourself out of the normal parameters you have established for hiring people. There are going to be, I think, about half the audience who are going to hear this, and it's going to really, really click with them because they're going to get rid of some restraints that they've had artificially. There's this paradigm that we sort of believe, oh, I need to hire a full-time or a part-time person, right? Like, and we kind of know like that particular job, paralegal, full-time paralegal. That job of bookkeeper, that's a part-time person who maybe is going to do also some other admin on the side, right? Stop building around the blocks you already know, the design structure you already know. You have multiple options for how to hire to get rid of your daily tasks. Part-time, full-time, freelance, and temporary expert. Part-time, full-time, freelance, temporary expert. The way we use these, you're familiar with part-time, you're familiar with full-time. Every time that you're thinking about hiring a position, ask yourself, should this be full-time? Should this be part-time? And model both of those for yourself. Think, okay, I need signing meetings to happen. So I'm thinking to myself, well, signing meetings are supposed to happen all over the day. So I'm going to hire a full-time paralegal so that way they're always available. I don't know about that. What if we manage to schedule all signing meetings, which is possible, in a 4-hour block of each day? Then I really only need a part-time paralegal. And I can smartly leverage that individual. And because I just hired the part-time paralegal, I now have resources to go and invest maybe in a second part-time employee. On the flip side, if I'm looking at it and I'm saying I'm trying to get rid of both signings and the actual funding side, and maybe even some of the drafting, if you try and squeeze all of that into a part-time paralegal because you're thinking that's all I can afford, you're going to burn through your talent so fast. You need a full-time person in there to help you out fundamentally. Otherwise, those tasks are still going to live on your plate because that part-timer is going to get squished. They're going to quit. Everything lands back on you. We got to think farther ahead than just the fear that we have today. So get creative on who can help you out and the type of person that you can hire. These days, Maddy, right? How many people can we hire to do work remotely? It's like infinite now.
Run our entire company on it. And let me say one other thing, Charlie. So like, a lot of the decision making is on your shoulders, but when you have freelancers, temporary experts, ongoing experts who are resources to you, I'm thinking about companies like Bench, for outsourced bookkeeping and a monthly subscription fee that is extremely affordable. They are the experts. Smith.ai, we are the experts in receptionist services and chat and answering and intake. And as a result, the only thing that I would encourage you to expand upon as Charlie is talking about, these different buckets and how you think about your staffing model is, have you asked someone else, or are you just making this decision in a silo based on your historical experience at other firms, your present firm, your friends' firms, et cetera? None of those data points necessarily has input from an outside expert, and that can be extremely helpful to just get a totally different unencumbered perspective that is from that bookkeeper, from that receptionist, from the consultant who works with the CRM or intake or marketing software that you're looking to implement. What do they see as the essential components, and how does that overlap with your goals and your outcomes? Because then you can really triangulate things so that your budget and your resources and your outcomes align.
As a really good example of kind of all that, and I'm sort of sitting in the expert seat on this. I have a private client who I'm working with down in Texas, and let's see, 4 months ago now, we were having a conversation. This is a really good illustration of process versus outcome. He was asking about hiring an associate attorney. And he was like, oh, I'm looking for kind of a young associate. So like he's talking process, right? Like there are certain cases that he wants this person to take over. Everything in his head is exactly pre-mapped based on, like what you said, what you've seen at other law firms, for example. He said, I'm looking for a young associate. I kind of want to train him up over time to maybe run my pre-lit department. And we talked about this for 35, 40 minutes or so. And we had mapped out salary structure, all this other stuff, right? We were right in the weeds of the process for it. And then I slowed down. I said, I almost used his name. I said, okay, client, I'm realizing now we've gotten really obsessed with this one employee. And I haven't asked you, like, what do you really want here? He said, well, it'd be really great if I just had someone to run my pre-lit department. Well, the associate attorney can do that eventually. How fast do you want this to happen?
Exactly.
As fast as humanly possible.
Exactly.
Okay, well then, what if we hire someone who's $110,000 per hour or per hour? Whoo, that'd be nice. $110,000 in salary with a bonus structure that ties them to the growth of the pre-lit department. And he was like, oh my God, I don't think I would have ever thought of that before, right? That's the advantage in the coach perspective of looking at the macro level and working with a ton of firms and kind of exploding every now and then what someone thinks is the right way to do things. And here's the wild part. And, some people are going to think I'm BSing on this. I could show them the text message that I got just about 24 hours later. He said, Charley, I just talked with one of my attorneys at the firm I was with previously. She's looking for the exact job we talked about yesterday.
Amazing.
6 weeks later, she's with his firm running the full pre-lit department.
Wow.
We had been talking about how he moved out of the $10 per hour work and focused more on the $100 per hour work. But what we got to was getting him out of even the $100 per hour work and putting more time in the $1,000 per hour work of building these unique community relationships that he's capable of building, of nurturing those relationships, of thinking even bigger, like we're planning out where's his next office, how does he take over another geography, etc. And that was just like an amazing example of, because he knew what to look for on his outcome, he ended up finding the process to solve it. But if we hadn't talked about that outcome, we would have been locked in on hire that associate attorney for $60,000 to $65,000 per year with a modest bonus structure, who you're going to train for the next 2 years while they shadow you and potentially set you 2 years back in progress, that we end up getting because he brought on someone to run the whole pre-lit department.
Also, that's another example of potentially projecting. It's an example of, are you putting someone in a place where they naturally are ready to fit and do fit? Because 2 years may or may not be appropriate for that timeline, whereas you have a lot fewer unknown variables when you already tap your existing network and say, who's already doing this? And I love in that example, Charley, you talk about this person was already in their sort of close sphere. They were at this firm, they were familiar with probably the caliber of work that person did. And that is a huge benefit to maintaining your network. You never know when you're going to need to tap it. Maybe you can recommend someone who is looking to hire and it's not necessarily you and you're owed a favor, or you deepen that relationship and that interaction. But what I love is that the speed that process sort of happened is directly proportional to the amount of effort and networking that already was in place. That can't just happen overnight. If that network didn't exist, that text message would not have happened.
You're absolutely right. And this is why, there are so many quotes about how luck actually occurs. And I love the phrase directly proportional. Oh, I love that term. And making it directly proportional to everything that you've done before. People look at a prominent athlete and they sort of, Darren Waller. So Darren Waller is a tight end for the Oakland Raiders. Look, I'm a Denver Broncos fan, but I'll give credit where credit's due. Darren Waller, tight end for the Oakland Raiders. He seems to be an overnight success because he had dealt with some drug issues and everything. So his talent was overshadowed by his personal demons. But people then say like, oh, he all of a sudden exploded on the scene. No. There was like a decade plus of work that went in prior to that, with him then also going to work on dealing with his drug and alcohol issues, all these things that he was doing before opportunity ever presented itself for him to take advantage of it. But if he doesn't do that decade of work, if he doesn't do then those 3 years of work on his personal demons, he can't get to that outcome.
And probably a network and surrounding yourself with other strong people who you feel like they have your back and they're there for you to help you succeed. And every small firm owner should be in a position where they have a network to bounce ideas off of, even if it's not a coach, although a coach is invaluable. How do you have people who you can sort of go to for help? And are you cultivating an open mind and seeking out those conversations? Because, the network, in that case where it was recruiting, and maybe it's in the case where it's supportive and for mental health and it just enduring harder times, that network means nothing unless you tap into it and you lean in and you say, how can I help? And then when it comes time, you lean in and you say, I need help.
So Maddy, if it's okay with you, I want to talk about email.
Sure.
I know, like violent transition. We go from mental health and substance abuse to email.
It's great. How do we reduce time spent on it?
And I would be really interested in the chat to hear how many times per day you currently check email. So if you want to chime in the chat real quick and just tell me how many hours per day is your email program open on your computer? Be honest. You're probably going to only publish it to the panelists, so we're the only ones who will see it. Or how many times are you checking email on your laptop, your phone, etc. The average person checks it literally dozens of times per day. Our very first response is just all day. I totally get it. Too much is our next response. Yes, I hear this all the time. And the problem is, Maddy, you joked about Pavlovian response earlier. The problem is we have a Pavlovian response to our email. When it shows us that there's something new, even worse, we might have like a ding or a notification that goes off. So I'll tell you what I've done personally to reduce email, knowing that it's a practical example. And then I will add on to that a framework that you can practically use. So first off, I don't actually have it around me, but it's over here. So this doohickey, right, the phone, much to the surprise of many, there is no business email on this phone. Absolutely none. When I am home and with my family, I cannot open my business email on my phone because it literally isn't in there. Just removed it. I removed it actually at the beginning of this year because I hated the fact that there was one night that I opened my email at 7:45 p.m. and I saw kind of an unhappy message, something that caused me consternation. I realized, why am I getting stressed at this? It's not like I'm going to solve this right now, because even if I sent an email in response, that person's probably not going to see it for the next day. Why am I personally stressing over this, taking away from my family in this moment? Got rid of it from my phone entirely. Which means, by the way, if I don't have my laptop nearby, there's just no access to email. And it's fine. Did you know that the world won't burn down if you don't have access to email? I found that out earlier this year. I expected to look behind me and find a giant conflagration engulfing the entire universe. It didn't happen. So in addition to that, so no email on phone. By the way, if you're wondering, well, what about contact forms that people submit that I'm able to catch and then call them back? You know what you can do is you can probably, Maddy, correct me if I'm wrong, you might be able to set up a system where you forward that to a Smith.ai, and like they have people who are supposed to be doing that at 7:45 p.m., right?
Exactly. Yes.
There we go. So like you either decide that, hey, I don't have to deal with the phone call at 7:45 p.m. at night, or you can just simply solve it by having it be someone else's problem. That's that. By the way, you want to know a structure of how to build a business? Figure out how to make it someone else's problem. I don't mean this like being a sloppy, lazy business owner. There's hard work involved. Let's be real here. There is deeply hard work involved. But whenever you think about how can I add essentially to someone else's burden so that way I can find a new burden for myself, that is how you can grow. Well, a big lengthy thing that we'll handle in just a second, I'm sure. So no email on your phone, okay? Mm-hmm. The next thing that I do is when I am in the office, I'm going to check my email 2 to 3 times per day. My ideal is 2. I will own, and actually my real ideal here is to check my email about 4 times per week, which some people induces a panic attack. I fully understand, but I have engineered to have a team that can bring problems to me if they escalate, in that I need to talk with them about it. So 2 to 3 times per day at most. My recommendation is 2 times per day. Usually once when you get in, and then once at either around lunchtime or at the end of day. Sometimes the reason I don't do end of day as my recommendation when I'm working with folks is simply because you might check it, not be able to do much about it, and then stress about it for the rest of the night, right? And so if we check it right when we get in, okay, now I know maybe what's going on in my morning. Check it at lunch.
Mhm.
Okay, now I know what I can deal with in the afternoon. Great, easy enough. In an ideal scenario, you check it once at lunch, okay? Once at lunch. That's it. That's all you check it. And here's what you do when you check it. You follow what I've loosely assembled as the RAID system. First, this is how you try to handle email. Respond. Does something require my response? I will respond to it. Assign. What email can I just forward to someone else on my team and say, hey, guess what? This is yours now. That's a lot of stuff, right? So I can be sometimes a central node of communication in the business, but like if something comes in about one of our events, it's getting sent to Jenny. I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm not going to think that it's my problem to solve it all. I'm not even going to pass it on to her and say, hey, let's talk about this later. I'm just going to send it to her. She is responsible of handling the events. That is her deal. By the way, you want another way to step out of the daily tasks? Make the daily task the legitimate responsibility of your team members. If you are always flying in to rescue someone, if you're always coming in and letting them, they can ask you any questions that they have. If you are always that backstop, they will always use you as the backstop. I guarantee you that a third of the audience is like smiling to themselves right now. And they're like, I think he's looking right at me. Because I know that if you try and play, if you are always answering the questions, if you are always, when someone walks in your door and they say, can I ask you a question? What is your response? Is it always to say, yes, yeah. Come on, anything. Yeah, anytime. You know what the better response is? My door was closed. I'm not saying you actually have to be that cruel, but right, setting a policy of if your door is closed, you are focusing. And the expectation is that they will solve that problem. You have to empower them to do that. You have, my kids learned to swim this summer. So last summer, we didn't really get to go to the pool at all, for specific reasons that we're all aware of. But we wanted them to learn how to swim this year. So we took them to the pool. And I'm not like totally old school, like toss them in the pool and they'll figure it out, like they're going to drown or survive, and we'll see how it all settles. But I was very much the person who, like when Veronica, my first grader, she starts swimming, and she was not a strong swimmer at first. She was real nervous. She started the summer with like floaties still on her arms, right? Just come out of kindergarten, floaties still on her arms. And we kind of told her like, hey, you can't use floaties. You're going to have to start going, right? I want you to come off of that wall and go to me. Come off of that wall and go to me. And I kept taking steps farther back in the water. So that way she had to keep going farther and farther until eventually she was going wall to wall, no problem, until she was diving off the diving board and diving down to the bottom of the 9-foot end on her own, because I let go and said, I know you can do this. You don't need me. And she'd be paddling at times, looking at me. At first it drove my wife crazy, but then she fully bought in on it and was just as good at it, if not better than me at this whole process, which was, she'd be paddling, be like, oh no. And I'd step another step back and I'd say, you've got it. I promise you've got it. You're not drowning right now. Look, you're not drowning, which means you're still above water and you can still move forward. Come on, come to me. Come on. You got to do the same thing with your staff. You got to actually let them try to swim. If you're always there to grab them and hold them up, be like, don't worry, it's okay, I got you. Are they ever going to progress? No. Then are you ever going to have the freedom to go swim laps on your own? No. That's what I wanted to do. That was my outcome, right? Swim laps on my own. So my kids had to learn how to swim safely. Assign. Information. So like you get an email about one of these webinars, right? Okay, you might want to read through that email. Maybe you're subscribed to a newsletter that you want to read. There's information that you're just going to consume. Let's be honest, that's part of it. And then the last one is destroy. If it is not of value to you, if you don't need to deal with it, if your team doesn't need to deal with it, just destroy it. You don't need to get too far in the weeds, just destroy it. By the way, sometimes you just need to go through and unsubscribe to some emails. That's okay, right? Or one of my favorite things to do, Maddie, is every now and then, there's like an email from maybe it's another coach or some other program or something that is no longer useful to me, but it would be useful to one of my team members. Like, let's say it's about events, right? I can forward an email of that to Jenny and say, hey, I want you to sign up and receive these emails because I'm unsubscribing. I want that information flow into the business, but I'm not the one who needs it the most.
Right. And you can set a rule on that too. If you know that there are certain emails that can be categorized automatically with the subject line or sender or newsletters, you can automatically have them go into a shared email folder. For example, at Smith.ai, we use Front, and Front app allows you to have shared inboxes where emails like that can be tagged or can be moved to a folder where it might be, ideas or coaching or inspiration, marketing campaigns we really like that we might want to emulate.
Right. Yeah. And that's the beauty of all this technology. There's so many ways that we're not utilizing it to its fullest because we're so busy in the processes of life. We're so busy in the process of running the business. We're so busy doing the work that sometimes we don't step back and say, how can I refix this so that way I'm really at my outcome? What's my ideal day look like? How does it look and feel? Like for me, touching my email just once during the day at most has been revolutionary. Whenever I achieve that, and oh, by the way, I don't check my email on weekends. Well, I actually did look at it on a recent weekend. I should own up to that. I should be honest with everyone and know that that I had to deal with that myself. I won't go into details, but I did check it on a weekend, but I really do. So then 50 out of 52 weekends on the year, I won't check my email. It's just, I'm not going to solve anything. Just not. And by the way, if you're worried about how other people might react, understand most people aren't looking for an instant response for you. And I know this because people don't look for an instant response from me. I don't expect an instant response from you. I regularly see people take their time on responses, and yet we think that like, oh, but they expect that from me. Like I'm supposed to do, I'm going to be better. I'm going to get the instant response.
You're getting it off their plate, and that doesn't necessarily, predict the timeline for you or impose a timeline on you.
Yeah. The number one recommendation I have for your relationship with email is stop leaving the program open. Stop. The email program should not be open throughout the day. Outlook, Spark, Gmail, whatever it is, close it down and check it at specific times. It will be there. I promise you, it will be there. Now, it forces you to actually engage with your email at the right time. Because the other risk, by the way, this is the secret risk about email, is when we have it on all the time, how many times do we end up missing an important email because it all just kind of like, just like washes over us. It's like, oh, it's just another email. And we pass it by, as opposed to 11:30 a.m. I'm checking and handling my email. I'm going to raid my email, respond, assign, information, destroy. I will raid my email at 11:30 a.m. Go into that with purpose.
Can I tell you something else, Charlie? And then I want to wrap, but also I would really like for you to explain how people can get in touch with you and have more one-on-one time with you. The last thing is, sometimes behaviors of ours are harder to change as fast as we need them to, or our business needs them to. So what I have taken to doing is delegate access to my inbox so that there is someone who I have known for years, actually, who I trust, and they can go and sort into those folders: urgent, today, respond, assign, deadline approaching, etc. Whatever they are. I have a few more categories than the ones that you have, but for me, I find that I get drawn in, and some of you may find this too. And I have a a habit that is hard for me to break, that if I let myself go into my inbox, I'll get sort of sucked in. The way that I've solved it is to not to retrain myself, because that's much harder. And it's not necessarily a problem I need to solve if I delegate it and I get myself out of it. Because if I go into my inbox and there's nothing there and it's all been moved into the folders, and I can go then into the priority folder where I need to focus and get action items done, then I put my, bad habit to good work, and I can focus on what's actually needing my attention. And all the sorting and reading and, oh, that article looks interesting, and I'll give myself a little time to read that right now, or I'm going to go and just unsubscribe because I'm, procrastinating on something else that I should be doing instead. That's really slippery, and it will end up eating way more time than you think it will. So, don't necessarily expect that you'll be able to change your habits, overnight, but set yourself up for success, knowing what your habits are instead.
The ideal should be find someone who serves the role of the executive assistant in your life. By the way, if you're a firm owner who's thinking to yourself, I really want to have like a $500,000 practice, run it at a really high profit margin, the hire I would make is an executive assistant type. Or even if you have a $3 million firm and you're like, I have a bunch of stuff that just gets stuck on my plate that I shouldn't be responsible for, executive assistant is a great person to hire. That person's job is to figure it out. They are your one person skunk works department to just handle things, just handle
and nag and manage up. And right, I mean, sometimes you need someone to nag you to say, don't forget about that deadline, or you told someone you'd send this, book, right, or something. So it's really important that you have people looking out for the promises that you do intend to keep. So Charley, how can people get in touch with you and your team?
So if they can read this absolutely insane handwriting up here, which they probably can. This is Charley, Charley at greatlegalmarketing.com. And as with any of these Smith.ai learning sessions, if you reach out and say, I saw you on the Smith.ai session, we'll schedule a one-on-one time, talk about your practice and see what might be a great solution for you in growing your practice with the help of a coach, whether in a large group, small group, or in some cases, one-on-one. So, and Maddy has put that up in the chat. Charley, which by the way, in a full-on font, like would be on a slide deck, it looks a lot nicer than this, but what can I say? This is who I am. Charley, Charley at greatlegalmarketing.com. Maddy, I'm just doing these antics just to entertain you right now.
Great, you're doing a really great job. Now, let's talk about that session just for a second. So it's a free consultation with you or a member of your team? Like
it'll be a free consultation. It'll be a free consultation where we will go over where you are in your practice and what your health, wealth, and happiness goals are, and try and set those stakes in place, set those outcomes in place. So that way we can backfill all of that with the processes that actually get you there.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we will follow up with everyone. If you registered for this live, if you're watching the replay, then obviously you have Charley's information in the show notes. Charley, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to see you and to learn from you.
You as well, Maddy. It's always great to work with the Smith.ai team.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.